All right, well then let's get into it. Harry Martinez, thanks for coming on the podcast. I'm looking over the podcast guest form that I have people fill out, on Google Forms. For those listening, you can check that out in the link or in the description of the podcast if you're interested in coming on the show. You've done quite a bit of stuff. You did a little bit of Marine Corps time, you did a little bit of Army time, you were a police officer, you volunteered to fight ISIS, like
Yes,
you've been kind of all over. Is it safe to say that that military lifestyle is something that suits you?
very much so. It's something that I've always explained it this way. I was raised Catholic, and the way I can illustrate my point of view is that the priest used to call it a vocation when they answered the call to God.
Mm-hmm.
And so, reflecting back on my life, I did the same, but my calling was the military. And that stayed with me from the time I was a child, reading books. And I was a bit of a nerd, so I read a lot of books as a kid. Started out with these small books, like 80 pages long, and
Mm-hmm.
graduated into novels reading that were like 500 pages in nature. And so, for me, it was a vocation. There was no other option for me. So it was going to be either full-time military for the rest of my life, or it was going to come down to law enforcement, one or the other. In my mind, they were closely related.
Do you have family in the military? Is that what drove you to this, or is it something that you just kind of naturally clung to?
It's a combination of both. I'm the first American in my family, and so the only person I had that could tell me about my family legacy in Colombia was my father. And so I often heard the tale of how he was a police officer, and it was during the periods when the cartels were just beginning to establish themselves in the late 60s and 70s. And he was with a partner, and the partner got murdered. And so my father decided the best thing was to remove himself. And growing up, he would make us watch these cop shows. And I'm gonna reveal my age. I grew up watching SWAT. I grew up watching The Rookies, Adam 12, Emergency. And in the course of that, my oldest brother, he had a fascination with the military. He was 2 years old. He's 2 years older than me. And when we weren't watching that, he would start watching these World War II shows. And they were pretty dramatic. A Bridge Too Far,
Mm-hmm.
Dirty Dozen, The Devil's Brigade, the Von Ryan Express. I could go on. And so all these contributed in what we would say today as an influencer. And then my own limited, naive way, I started to get involved in reading books. And the reason that happened was my mom kept us very isolated. And so every Saturday when she wasn't working, she would take us to the local library. And she's like, pick out 10 books. When we were kids, I'm like, okay. Now I would pick out my 10 books. Well, my tendency was to go into the historical section, and it started with reading autobiographies. And they were only like 80 pages long. They actually had illustrations, so it was easy for a potential Marine. And I just started reading. I didn't start right away with the military. I started reading about presidents, George Washington, Lincoln, representatives of our country, founding fathers, Helen Keller, Nat Turner. And by the time I was in fifth grade, the reading started to become more upscale. That by the time I reached eighth grade, I was reading 500 page novels. Some of it was what we call historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the this kind of led to I suppose it enabled me to expand on my feelings of patriotism, understand it, and what this country really meant to me. And my father was constantly honest, like, listen, these opportunities that are standing in front of you, from like simply education, you wouldn't have in Colombia. Our options were very limited over there. Here, you can do anything you want. You can lose something, you can fail at something, And if you just hustle, you're going to get what you want. And so I thought, okay, and I'm going to do my best. But these books, I ended up reading John Jakes. I don't know if you ever heard of that author.
No, I haven't.
He started out with a simple book, and it was called The Bastard. And I started reading it. It was about a kid, and his name was Philip. And because of certain circumstances, he travels across from England into the United States before it's even the United States. And the author ends up creating a series of books surrounding this family as they move through the development of our country, leading from the American Revolutionary War to the Industrial Revolution in the early 1900s. And that shaped me. And there were certain things that stood out to me, like this is a family who has a legacy. And in my romantic, naivete kid mindset, I'm like, that's what I want. I want to move with the times of this country, and I'm willing to defend it. And so by the time I turned 17, I could not wait to sign up for the military. I was a recruiter's dream. It was too easy. I called up on my 17th birthday and I said, I'm 17, I can sign up. And he said, well, I need your parents' signature. My reply was, too easy. And I ended up signing with the Army National Guard at 17 in junior high school. And between the summers of junior and senior year, I went to basic training. In my ignorance, I had no mentorship. I had no real guidance. It was my impression what the Army was. And I was just happy being in uniform as a young kid. And my first MOS, military occupational specialty, was signal, telecommunications operator. And for 4 years, I did that for the National Guard. I hated it. It was boring. The National Guard at the time was in its poorest state. I didn't know this, but looking back, I realized, wow, this is not where I want to be. And I remember being on the drill floor. So it's like a warehouse. And then you have this flat surface and it's open. And this is where you hold your formations. You have sidebar conversations. And young Joes are going to have their own little conversations. But in the midst of all this activity that was non-military related, there were stories of Rangers, Marines, Special Forces, Airborne. And as I was developing in the National Guard, I came to the realization I don't want to be here. I don't want to be one of these older guys talking about someone they knew. To me, it was the equivalent of being in the gym and saying, hey, I know this guy who can bench 300 pounds, but it's not you. So I thought, I want to be one of those guys they're talking about someday. And so I picked up E5. And in the National Guard, they can actually rescind that order, take back the promotion, and bring you back to your original point. And if you accept the promotion, they expect you to stay there in the Signal Corps. And that runs across the entire National Guard and probably in the military as well, active duty. And so when I said, hey, I want to move over into military police, they said, that's fine. You can do that. However, we're going to rescind your orders and you're not picking up E5. And I was like, okay, I'm fine with that. If I did it once, I'll do it again. I felt that confident. About this time, I was 20 years old, 3 years in the Guard already. I went to the regular Army schools for signal and military police, came back, and being 1 year with them, with the military police, I wasn't satisfied. And they had a lot of personal things going on at the same time. I graduated high school now. I was working at Johnson & Johnson as a chemical lab technician. And unbeknownst to me, between 19 and 20, I would be involved in a relationship where I had a son unplanned. But I took on that responsibility. And by the time I reached 21, I decided I'm in my 5th year in the National Guard. I'm unhappy. I'm not satisfied. I'm a part-time dad. I got a full-time job. I'm trying to go to school, and I need some direction and purpose. And lo and behold, you have this event, a personal event. I'm going to work. By this time now, I am employed by Colgate-Palmolive in the research and development. And I did pretty well that they were moving me into marketing. And I don't even have a degree. But in my youth, irresponsible mindset, I had this car. I had no insurance. My license was expired. My registration was expired. And the vehicle was unexpected. And as I'm driving down this road, there's a police checkpoint. And they're just pulling cars over. And I got 4 tickets. And I was very disappointed in myself. I'm trying to get my life together. I've got a son now about two years old, closing on 2. I'm not involved in any real relationship. And then in front of me, there's this billboard. And the billboard is black. But in the center, you can see a face. And he has a white cover and a dark black bill that shines despite the flat black behind it. And the face is divided by a sword. It was the Marine Corps. And I'm looking at my 4 tickets, and the police officer's telling me, have a good day. And I'm thinking to myself, go F yourself. And I realized I shouldn't be angry with him. And I realized I'm also leading a very, I don't think I used these terms back then, but my life was all over the place. And I needed direction, I needed guidance, and I needed to be in a culture where I was surrounded by people that were going to help me develop into a productive citizen. And so I turned that car around. I drove like 2 miles and walked into the Marine Corps office. But let me back up a little bit. When I decided to go active duty, the Army, I actually discussed it with the regular Army recruiters. And because the National Guard had such a tainted legacy, they said to me, we don't care what you did with the National Guard. We're not going to recognize your rank. We're not going to recognize your time. What we're going to do is make you an E2, and you would join the ranks. And you can go into another MOS, or you can maintain your MOS, because that came from regular school, regular Army school. And I was like, oh, if I'm going to do this over again, I'm going to go to the Marine Corps. And so that's when the police motor vehicle stop happened, and I'm like, this I'm doing. So I went right to the Marine Corps, and I walked into the office. They gave me a pre-ASVAB test. They said, hey, man, you did really well. So what we want you to do is we want you to become an electrician for the Marine Corps, and we'll give you $5,000 bonus for sign-on. And I'm a kid. I got a son to take care of. I'm thinking, well, that's I can walk away from the Marine Corps and still have a skill. But in the same thought, I thought, but that's not what I want to do. If I'm going to do 4 years in the Marine Corps, I'm going to do what people think the Marine Corps is about. So then I thought, well, slow down. You're not a big dude. You're a bit of a nerd. Can you handle it? So I thought about military police. And they're like, yeah, man, we can send you to military police school. However, when you graduate from Parris Island, there'll be a 6-month holdover before you can even get to the school. And I thought that's not going to work, because that means working parties, details. You're basically everybody's landscaper, painter,
Yep.
wood chipper. Everything's going on. So I'm like, that's not going to happen. What else you got? He goes, and he was a short African-American, gunny, pretty laid back. And I remember asking, what do you do? He goes, oh, I'm chemical. Back then we called it NBC. Today we know it as CBRN.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I've already been dealing with chemicals for the last 4 years. I'm good. I said, how about the infantry? He says, hey, man, listen, you'll make Parris Island. But if you go into the infantry, it's going to give you 2 things, a hard life and a rifle. I thought, well, that's what everyone thinks the Marines are. I was like, sign me. And within less, I went to MEPS. Then this recruiter, he took me to a strip bar. We had beers because I was 21 years old.
Yeah.
I remember the night before we had to go to MEPS. We were supposed to go to a hotel, and then they pick us up at the hotel and they move us to MEPS. Mm-hmm. I went to a bar. He came looking for me. And I just wasn't taking it that serious. I really didn't understand the context of the decision I had made. Because in the National Guard, anytime I went away, I was always coming home. And this thought escaped me. So here I am in a bar dancing. This Marine comes through the dance floor. He goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Are you drunk? Because if you're drunk, this will mess up your chances to get through MEPS. I can't have you drunk going through MEPS." I'm like, "Oh, okay. I had a few beers, but I'll be good." He goes, "You better be." So next morning, picks me up. We go to MEPS. I pass everything. And I remember there was a bunch of Jersey guys. I'm from New Jersey, born and raised. And there's a bunch of Jersey guys. He goes, "All right, how many here are Marines, want to be Marines?" Like, there were like 11 hands. And the Marine recruiter goes, "What'd you guys do? Watch Apocalypse Now or something?" And what the heck? And he's like, "All right, everybody over here." You go through. And off we went. Within like 24 hours after that, I was on a plane. I landed in South Carolina. We were met by a Marine. He was very polite. We were there all day. And finally the night arrived. It was really late. And we get on this bus. And we're driving, we're tired. And I remember very specifically moving across this bridge. And there was lights all along the bridge. And we were going over water, obviously. And then we started to pull into Paris Island. And the bus stopped. The doors swooshed open. And all hell broke loose.
For sure.
And I'm going to be honest. By the time I graduated, I bought it all. I wanted to be that good Marine. I was going to do 20 years. I was a squad leader. I was a good shot. I mean, there were so many shifts from what I was in the Army National Guard to what I was going through in Paris Island. I was physically fit. I was running 20-minute 3-miler. I was doing pull-ups. I was being recognized for my leadership ability. But I wasn't that young. I was 4 years older than most of my peers during that period. I was at 2nd Battalion, 2083. I remember every morning waking up, especially when I was in. So you're a former Marine, but I'm assuming there's an audience out there that are not, and they're probably interested. So if you remember, you start at the highest level. And as you progress through the phases, you're going down to the lowest level. So my barracks, I used to wake up in the mornings and I slept on the top rack. And I remember always looking out and I could see the replica of the Iwo Jima statue on the blacktop drill area where we used to constantly drill. And I knew that history. And I always thought to myself, I can do that. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to die for my beliefs, and I'm willing to carry the Eagle Globe and anchor through it all. I mean, I'm telling you, I swallowed the Kool-Aid and everything.
Well, you got to, man. I don't think there's an option to not, at boot camp. Like, I came out of Paris Island fucked up, walking around for a couple weeks, like, what am I doing? Like, I can scratch my neck. Why am I not, like, sitting here dealing with it being itchy? Or why am I tucking my shirt into my gym shorts? Like, the fuck is wrong with me? It's definitely a mind fuck when you're down there. After 3 months, you get to this point where it's like, dude, this is never gonna end. You get to this is my life now. That's what I thought. I was like, graduation's not coming. We're just here now. This is it. And one day you finally finish, and it's like, holy crap! I was so fucked up. I remember my parents were like, hey, let's get out of here. We graduated. It's like, hey, let's get in the cars and go get something to eat out in town. And we get in the cars and we're like, how do we get off base? And I'm like, I have no idea. I have no idea where we're even at right now because we walked everywhere. And if we were in a bus or anything like that, it was heads down the whole time. I didn't realize until I came back to Paris Island to visit it in 2009. I was in South Carolina for some training. I was like, cruise down to Paris Island, check it out. I didn't even realize, I was in 3rd Battalion. I didn't even realize that 3rd Battalion was right next to the rifle range. I could always hear the rifle range, but I thought it was like miles away because when we went to the rifle range, we hiked for miles to get to it. But we were literally not even a half a mile from it, I don't think.
I still don't know the layout. I have two older sons. Is that right? Well, I have two sons, and they both joined the Marine Corps. Both went through the '03 series. One became an '03-31, the other one an '03-11. And they ended up doing their combat tours in Afghanistan with their respective units. But my point is, that was the second time I came back to Parris Island, watched my second oldest graduate, and I still didn't know the island.
Yeah.
He's like, you don't remember? I'm like, no, man, my world was very narrow. And I was done with Parris Island once I got back on the bus.
How different did you find being in Marine Corps boot camp compared to Army boot camp? Like, it had to have been was it like a culture shock? You know, like, holy shit, this is way different than what I already did.
So there's two things that stood out to me between the Army and the Marine Corps. And I think both, let me preface by saying this. This is my truth. This is my perception. It's my opinion. It's how I remember it. Because this is what influenced me, whether I succeeded or I failed. And it developed me into the person that you see sitting in front of you. So beginning with the Army, I was 17 years old. I was not a jock. I weighed 121 pounds. I was 5'7" probably at the time, still growing. I was very much intimidated. And I went to Fort Jackson, which is a Pogue basic training area.
Relaxing Jackson.
And I didn't even know what Pogues were. I don't even remember hearing that. My drill instructors were very fierce. My drill sergeants, they were very fierce men. They were in these Cochrane airborne leather boots. Their uniforms were pressed. Their Smokey the Bear hats were just perfectly aligned. And they spoke in a normal tone, but they had nothing regulated and prevented them from striking you, breaking you down, and then trying to build you up. So what the Army basic training for me was, I got to learn customs and courtesies. I had a rudimentary understanding of very basic tactics. I started to see the military for what it was, being on a big base. And then even though I was on this place called Tank Hill, I lived in these squad bays that were probably still going back from Vietnam to Korea, probably all the way to World War II. I thought, wow, man, some people are really signing up, and they're staying. I get to go home. And I was like, thank God. I wasn't the greatest soldier graduating from basic training. I'll tell you right now, I remember we were all in a semicircle, and our drill sergeants were in front of us. And I didn't have a really good relationship with them. And they made me very aware of that. And the drill sergeant was looking at individual soldiers. And when he got to the category, he goes, there's some marginal soldiers in this group. He would look at us and he pointed at us and he's like, you're marginal, you're marginal, you're marginal. I was one of those. And I thought, I've got a lot of growing up to do.
That was at the end of boot camp that he did that?
Yeah.
Man, how fucked up is that?
Yeah.
Like, you were probably super proud that you finished boot camp, and then he just crushes you. Like, yeah, you made it, but
you're marginal.
Man.
And you're 17 years old.
Fuck, dude. That's a mind fuck right there, dude.
So I was like, okay. But, I guess I had I grew up with a lot of resilience in my life. I watched my mom and dad struggle with learning a second language. And there was discrimination back then. And there's discrimination today, and that's a whole nother subject. But they just rolled with the blows. And they sacrificed for us. They worked in factories. And, I'm not going to let somebody bring me down. I can't say that was my thought. And I just thought, okay, whatever, man. I knew I didn't perform to my optimal level. This was all new to me. So whatever that is and whatever I've learned, I'm going to try to do better. 5 years later, I would be at Paris Island, and it paid off. It paid off because I already knew what I was going to endure, the yelling, the screaming, the quarterdeck, which sounded like a torture chamber. Watching guys slide from the sweat, and in some cases the tears, listening to these demons run back and forth in this voice that I could only describe to someone who's never been there, sounding like Popeye. Come here, you. Hey, you.
For real.
And it didn't bother me because I knew this was the environment I was going to exist in. Mm-hmm. But it was 12 weeks long. And I became a squad leader. I got into fist fights. I lost one it was a spectacular loss. He knocked me out. But I was so Marine Corps mindset that when I woke up, my first question was, did I win? And they're like, no, Martinez, no. No.
It's all right, bud. It's all right.
Good judgment. Poor execution, man.
Rest for a second. You'll be okay.
And my drill instructors probably, I think they take a course because I always wanted to be one and I never got the opportunity. And we'll get to that. So I remember my drill instructor came out. They're like, what happened? They're like, Firewatch got knocked out. He's like, who? It's like, Martinez. He goes, Martinez, come here. But I run over, stand at attention, recruit request permission to speak. He goes, don't speak. Just get in the house. So I go into the house. Where there's their little
DI hut, yeah.
And for a moment, he closes that door, and he became a human being. And this guy, I still remember his name, Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant Martin. He was black as a black night, man. And his eyes were red, like a demon. And he had this voice, like it never went up. It was like a Clint Eastwood voice. And he goes, what happened, recruit? I was on fire. He was like, nope, don't get crazy in here. Tell me what happened. So you remember, you have to speak in third person.
Mm-hmm.
This recruit was on fire watch. I went to correct another private, and we got into an argument, and he knocked me out. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and he looked in my eye. He goes, I like that. He goes, what did you do after that? I said, well, I resumed my duty, and he was back in the bunk, in the rack. And he's like, okay, get back out there. You're doing another watch, another hour. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you lost the fight.
Fuck yeah.
So get out there, and next time don't lose the fight. Like, okay. And that's the Marines. That was the Marines. I was like, I didn't say Roger that. I was like, aye, drill instructor. And did an about face and left. The next day, I had this huge black eye. And I was wearing those birth control glasses. I was an ugly private, bro. With this big nose, shaved head. That was not a pretty sight. And wearing the birth control glasses, it was solid. I was not going to get any woman at that point in my life. And they made me take off the glasses, and we had to take the platoon picture. Mm-hmm. And the drill instructor goes, Martinez, come here. He's like, you're going to hold the bugle stick. Because we won bugles. So there I am in my platoon picture with this black eye holding the bugle stick.
Oh, yeah.
And those moments were, it was a far cry from what I went through in the Army. And the lessons that I learned in the Marine Corps to this day impact me. One was basic rifle marksmanship. In the Army back in the 1980s, it was like 3 to 5 days. They hand you 9 rounds. They tell you got 18 rounds to qualify in. They gave you this quick lecture on zeroing and positioning, and all you're trying to do is get through the day to get to the next day. That's all I cared about. It had no impact on me. When I went to the Marine Corps, the basic rifle marksmanship program was very, very serious. We got jackets. We were told to take off our gear. They explained to us, and I know that you know this, but again, it's to the audience that doesn't. You literally will go through 2 weeks. Your first week, you don't shoot a single round. You're just aiming at a barrel. You're learning trigger control, sight alignment, sight picture. You're learning the fundamentals. from point A to point B, and you're learning also to some degree ballistics. And you're noting everything down. Where your round impacted, what was your wind, what was your elevation. And I never knew this stuff. And so when I finally started, the second week when we finally started engaging targets, I was doing really well. And other guys were struggling. And so unbeknownst to me, this would open up doors 2 years later in the Marine Corps for me. So, but anyway, that was a big change. Two, I felt such tremendous pride in being a Marine, because what the Marines did is they brought us into a theater, and out came this Marine wearing an old uniform. And very quickly, they showed us the history of the Marine Corps. And it was like, you're next. You represent us. Do not let your fallen brothers. Do not fail them. You're next. You will be represented up here. They constantly enforcing that. And I know the movies mock it, but it's actually saying, and I don't know if you went through that kind of the same experience in terms of, like, this is the Marine Corps. We have a legacy. We will not let our brothers down, those who have fallen. You show respect. I remember reading The Green Monster about the Marines of Samar, those that got lost and those that survived, and how when the Samar Marines would walk into the chow hall, someone would scream, "Samar Marine on deck," and all the Marines would stand up to show their respect for this Marine and what he endured in those times in the Philippines. And I was like, wow, this is the Marine Corps. I remember reading the story in SOI, School of Infantry. And again, I'm reading about the Marine Corps, and there is a conversation between two wives. One was an Army wife, and the other one was a Marine wife. And these are all true tales according to the book that I read. And they were selling it there in the PX. And the Army wife walks up to the Marine wife, and she says, "I understand your husband didn't make colonel. And I'm really sorry to hear that. And I know they're good friends, but he'll get there." And the Marine wife turns to her and goes, "But my husband's still a Marine." And that impacted me. It sounds corny, but that impacted me. My mind was like a sponge. And this would play out. That, to me, was the biggest difference between the Army and the Marine Corps. Marksmanship and pride. Pride in the entire organization. Don't get me wrong. Army has a great, amazing legacy. It has great stories at the division levels, at the brigade combat levels. And there isn't much difference in the mentality when we're in combat, because I fought as a Marine and I fought as a soldier in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the two are the same, but there are distinct differences.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think the pride in the organization is definitely huge in the Marine Corps. Marine Corps history is a huge thing in boot camp.
Yes.
I mean, it's a constant thing. And I think also when you get out, or not even get out, or when you get to the fleet and stuff, I think you see a lot of pride in units and stuff that are very, historic units that have a long lineage of, combat actions or heroic deeds and stuff. They bring back dudes to units for reunions, or you see, I don't know, there's memorial parks and a lot of different regimental, like, command post areas and stuff like that. And, obviously the Marine Corps Ball every year is a big deal. And we make it a big deal. We make it about the history and stuff like that. And I don't know. I think you're right. It's huge. It's, I was getting goosebumps literally while you're sitting there talking about it, because it's for real. You come out of boot camp thinking, man, this is way bigger than me. It's not me anymore. It's like the Marine Corps. Like, it's a huge. I'm here to, like, keep this legacy going, and I don't want to fucking drop the ball and make us look bad.
And just to even illustrate the mindset that one walks away with. So when my sons entered, I knew right from watching my sons grow up, my oldest son especially. He initially joined the Air Force. And I said, what are you doing? "Yeah, I'm going to join the Air Force, Dad." Like, all right. I said, "I don't think you're Air Force material, but I'm not going to tell you yes or no." And I never encouraged my sons to join the military at all. I thought that had to be their own decision. However, I'm sure they grew up. They probably snuck into my closet, grabbed some of my old uniforms, put them on, and that plays into a development of a child.
For sure.
It puts them on that path.
Hmm.
I'm sure the sons of firefighters played around with their dad's helmet. The kids of police officers, not all of them want to become police officers, but I'm sure somewhere along the line they entertained the idea, something they grabbed from their dad's closet. And so my oldest son, he was a wild man. He was captain of the football team at one point, good looking guy, well built. And he was just a wild man. I'm like, man, he has the inklings of a Marine. So he goes into the Air Force, goes into the TAC-P pipeline, passes the first 15 weeks. Well, it was 13-week course, but he ended up being recycled for 2 weeks. And he's like one of the youngest graduating guys, service members from this pipeline. Unfortunately, they found out he had asthma and they dropped him from the course after he had just passed the hardest part, because that first 13 weeks, they have an 85% attrition rate. They call it the Superman course. It's all swimming. And I'm not going to steal his thunder if he ever talks about it, but I'll say that much. And he decided, I'm out. If I can't be this guy, I'm out. And later on, he would become a Marine, go through Paris Island, graduate, distinguished honor grad from Paris Island, and he loved it. To this day, the Marine made almost a similar impact on him. Everybody's his brother. Now, my second oldest, his name is James. My oldest is Joshua, so I got a son named James. James grew up listening to me and my son talk about the Marine Corps. And so naturally, he was going to go to St. Pat. He wanted to sit at that table with us. And he signs up right after high school. And then I said, James, don't go infantry. You're not going to like it. You're an intellectual person. You're an independent thinker. And I was using phrases that I grew up that described me. So I could see some of myself in my son. And honestly, he wasn't a savage yet. By no means. Like, I think I can fairly say my son and I were savages. But my second oldest, he just wasn't quite there, and there was concern. I didn't want him to be bullied. I didn't want, because being in the fleet, they take their trash seriously. That boot's either going to perform or he's out. And they will make you like the Afghans used to do with their little feminine boys. And I'm sorry that offends people out there, but it's the best way to describe it. If you're not cutting it, you're going to be brought down. You're going to be their chai boy. And it's just the ugly part of the Marine Corps. But our business is killing. So I get that.
Yeah, it's got to be that's got to be one of the toughest things ever, to come into the Marines and then not perform as expected and get ridden a lot as a boot, as a new guy. And I mean, I've been on both sides. We're all boot to somebody at some point, right?
Sure.
So, I've gotten my fair share of getting yelled at or getting told that whatever I'm doing is wrong or whatever. And I've turned around as an NCO and a staff NCO and done the same and looked at some of the new guys and being like, dude, what the fuck is your problem, man?
Yeah.
And something I've thought about a lot since I've gotten out is not, a lot of the guys I worked with that weren't very good Marines, that you're like, man, I don't want to associate with this dude just because he's not very good at his job. It really sucks for those guys because they get kind of, I don't know, they get ostracized a little bit if they're really not that good. Especially because when I was in a situation like when I was when I was a forward observer, we're working with small teams. So if you're on this small team and you fucking suck and everyone has to carry your weight and it's just, man, it's got to be tough to be that guy. And something I've considered since I've gotten out a lot is like, a lot of the dudes that I looked at, and I'm like, this guy sucks at being a Marine. He sucks at his job. He sucks at this, like whatever. they're probably super cool dudes. They're probably super nice people that are just great people in general, maybe out in the real world or whatever. They just weren't very good Marines, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that because it's not supposed to be for everyone, you know?
It's not. It's not. I definitely agree with that. And
I try, and real quick, I do want to say, and I try not to hold it against them. So guys that I knew that I was in with that were like, we would consider a shitbag or something like that. If they reached out to me, I would be like, hey, what's up, man? You know, like this is a completely different world. We're on the outside world now. It's like, you know, shit's not as serious anymore, you know?
I was in a situation like that where I did run into a guy almost 20 years after being out of the Marine Corps. So again, I'm from New Jersey, and in Philadelphia, where Tun Tavern was once located, they shut down streets, and Marines from all over the place arrive on these Philly streets, and it's one big, massive Marine Corps party. And in the sea of all these people, I meet one of my Marines from Parris Island, one of my peers. And I'll be quite frank. He was a jerk off. He was a bully. He went after guys that were smaller than him. And he went after one of my closest friends I called him the White Mike Tyson. This guy would later be knocking guys out with one punch. And me and his name is Madola. Madola was my brother, man. And he called me my Goomba. Hey, come here, my Goomba. He was Italian. And we always hung out together. But Madola was just this. He was already a savage in Parris Island, on Parris Island. And the point is, this guy, this bully, I would meet 20 years later. Well, probably even a little longer than that, because that was probably like 2010. I came out in 92. Yes, somewhere around there. Anyway, and he still looked the same. He was a little heavier, but I immediately recognized him, and he immediately recognized me. Probably because of the big nose. Hard to forget, but it's good. Moving along. And we talked like two human beings. I didn't bring up any of the nasty things that he did, and he didn't pick on me or try to. I held my own, but I wasn't a marginal Marine when I left. I'm telling you right now. I was a squad leader. The one thing that, so my drones, anyway, we meet, we get along like two human beings, and we never talked again since then. But like, it just reinforces what you're saying. If you meet somebody, and regardless what the past is, you're going to treat each other like a human being. And I've seen that.
Well, plus the immaturity level is probably way greater 20 years later. You know, a kid going through boot camp is there trying to find himself and being in one of the most like high intense, high stress, you know, they're teaching you to kill people. They're like getting you ready to go out and go to war. Like, so it's like your mentality is completely different then as you would be as like a 30-year-old adult, you know?
I probably am the most immature 56-year-old man you're going to meet, Justin. I hope it's maturity on my part. But yeah, I'm sure that's a contributing factor in all of it. And you're right. I mean, there's no escaping that. So, you know, getting back to my son James, he joins the Marine Corps, becomes an 0311, and he would tell you Marine Corps wasn't that. He was not impressed. It didn't make when he still to some degree spoke negatively of it. Even to this day, speaks negatively of his experience. Ironically enough, now I have tattoos. My oldest son has tattoos. This young man who will tell you, yeah, it's cool, Marine, yeah, whatever. You know, it has a negative vibe to it. Is covered in Marine Corps tattoos.
Really?
Has more tattoos than me and my son, my oldest son combined. Marine Corps.
That's the way it works, right?
Right?
Yeah, the people that
I'm like, shut up, James. You love it. So that you there's not one part of your skin that doesn't have something related to the Marine Corps. Shut up, man.
Yeah, you bought in. You bought into it.
Yeah, he did. And he probably hates himself for it.
That's all
And I
good. Yeah, I
mean that
mean,
lovingly.
I think a lot of people speak negatively about certain aspects of the military when they get out, or in the Marine Corps specifically. And it is what it is. It's not gonna be. It's like for the people that have never been in the military. It's like every other job. There's bullshit you got to put up with. Like there's a lot of cool stuff that you get to do, but there's a lot of bullshit that comes along with it. There's administrative tasks that are stupid. There's you'll see favoritism. You'll see different things that are just like, why is this the way it is? Or this is how we do things. Like, we're not going to change it because this is how we've always done things, kind of mentality sometimes. And you got to push, you learn to deal with people is one of the good things about the military. You learn to deal with assholes from all walks of life. And you see that there are assholes from all walks of life because you're introduced to, people from all over the country, all over the world. And among them are assholes.
Right. And here it is. You're in high school, and suddenly you're in a world where you're being taught the most evil thing that you can do to another human being is to kill him. You know nothing about him. He's done nothing to you. He's just following his ideals, and you're following your ideals. And when you go and walk on that death ground, you're about to kill each other. And there's only one way you're going to walk out of that. And you're not a survivor. You're not a survivor on that death ground. You're the victorious one. You and I are sitting here talking to each other because we won that fight. And so you're an 18-year-old young man. Your whole world's been surrounded by sports, church, family, maybe even none of that. Your baseline could be completely different. And then you're immersed onto a squad bay with 72 other people, each with their own story, and each from their own perspective of life. But now you're all going to share one thing. Your heads are going to be shaved. You're going to talk in the third person, and you're going to learn everything that surrounds the idea of killing a fellow human being. That's going to have impact, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're going to be feeling proud of it. Because it's required. And I think people often forget what infantry means. And it's almost a shame because I worked with 1st ANGLICO. That's how I met Captain Jason Angel, who you had as a guest. And a lot of people tend to forget. The word infantry can be rooted in the word infant. It's the closest thing that we have in the military where you are producing children of war. What do you know as a 17 and 18-year-old? Nothing other than your opinions, your black and white world. Your brain, we already know, is not even fully formed till you're 25. You're the perfect specimen to impress upon all these ideals surrounding in the idea that when you spill blood, that's something to be proud of. Think about that. Anyway, sorry, Justin.
No, man, that's the reality of it. It's you come out of boot camp just ready to go. Ready.
Yeah,
to...
and it doesn't mean you can kick ass out there because I know I've seen myself included. Like, oh, I didn't win that fight either.
Well, even out of boot camp, you really don't know anything. You think you do. You're like, oh man, look at me, I'm really good at marching and snapping, popping my rifle and stuff like that. I shot on the rifle range, which I will say, I think that's a huge deal, and I think I'm really glad that the Marine Corps takes pride in its marksmanship program, and that it's even the most basic. The recruits are all forced to learn how to use a rifle, not just sit down and pull the trigger, but to how do I make my impacts count? You know what I'm saying? There's every rifle range in the Marine Corps. Well, maybe not everyone, but all the ones out in Camp Lejeune and I think Paris Island, as you're driving out to them, they have little signs along the road that say if you can't hit your target, you can't kill them. If you can't do,
right.
And it's all these reminders that there's a reason behind this. And I just remember being man, I am shooting a fucking target, a man-sized target at 500 yards with no kind of optics. I'm looking through this little iron sight. It's windy out here, and I'm hitting targets at 500 yards. This is crazy, and it's kind of it's kind of weird to think like that. I'm one of the people that I think, they use ACOGs at boot camp. I really wish they would just go back to like iron sights and do that, just because it's the fundamentals of the weapon itself. You're learning the most basic fundamentals. Because when we switched to ACOGs, I remember learning the rifle in boot camp and then in the fleet and stuff before we got ACOGs. It was, hey, you know your shot, know where your impact's going to be, make adjustments, as necessary for wind and whatever. You learn all the adjustments. Don't Kentucky windage it. For those that don't know what that means, hey, the wind's blowing from left to right, so I'm going to hold my sights just a little bit to the left, rather than adjusting the sight so I hold in the same spot every time. I'm going to hold just a little bit. Well, when we got ACOGs, they're like, hey, Kentucky windage it. You're going to be holding it to the left if it's windy. You're going to be holding it this direction if it's windy. And I'm like, man, that really sucks. We're taking away the fundamentals of understanding how this, how this whole thing operates without that sight. I agree that we should have them in the fleet and obviously deploy. There's people that are like, oh, back in my day, we never used those. Well, yeah, okay. I don't know. I just think it'd be good for the fundamentals. I just heard recently, though, that the Marine Corps marksmanship program is completely changed. They've completely changed the series of fires and stuff like that. I think they're still shooting out the 500 yards and stuff, but it's the way it was is different.
Significant changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're even across the board for the Army. I know there's been significant changes for the Marine Corps as well. I agree that we still need to employ, I don't know if that's the right word. We still need to educate service members on the fundamentals of iron sights. Once you master iron sights, the optic is simply an enhancement. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to use myself as an example. I went into the Army. I came out 17 years old, and though I had qualified, I've never failed in marksmanship. But in the Army, I wore the pizza box, and I was proud of it because I really didn't know what I was doing out there. And we were only shooting out to 300 yards or 300 meters. So I'm thinking to myself, I really don't know what I'm doing. I used to get online and I would please God, don't let me bolo, please. And then turn around and, hey, do you have a grandmother? And yeah, man, is she alive? He's like, yeah, can you tell her to pray for me out here, man? Because I don't want to embarrass myself. And if they said, yeah, Martinez, score 23, I'm like, yes. Even though it was just a pizza box, because that's all I knew. I went from a pizza box Army marksman, and for those who don't understand that, you'll hear marksman and you think that's a title that indicates you're an expert shooter, and that's not the case. There's 3 levels. You and I both know that. You have marksmanship, sharpshooter, and then the prized possession of the expert title. I was a marksman. By the time I left the Marine Corps, I had been selected and I had been operating with a Marine sniper unit called STAY at the times, Surveillance Target Acquisition. I was with 1-6. I went from that because why? The Marine Corps knows how to educate people. They can take anyone and make them a shooter. I'm a walking testimony of that.
Yeah, for sure. Even in 2006, what you described is, and your boot camp experience for the rifle range was the same. It was very serious. It was the DIs didn't fuck with you because you had the PMI, the primary marksman or
correct
primary marksmanship instructor, I believe.
Yep.
He was there to teach, and he would show you everything. Here's the basics of the weapon. Here's how every piece of the rifle. Here's how you sight it properly. Here's our different shooting positions. Our sitting, our kneeling, prone, and then, like you said, you're going to spend an entire week in those 3 different positions, snapping in, staring at a barrel with a target painted on it, and just working on your trigger control, sight alignment, sight picture. And then once you've done that, you're going to spend another week shooting every day. From the time the sun comes up, as soon as you can see the targets, you start shooting until, everyone's gone through that whole day. Then you come back out the next day and you do it up until, I think, that Thursday. And then you do qualifications. And then it's qualifications times. And there's very few people that by the time it's time to qualify that on the range that become unqualified that don't pass. And most of those people just need a little bit of one-on-one work, and then they get qualified. I think, and I believe it's still the case now in the Marine Corps, though, if you don't qualify, if you can't meet that qualification, they will separate you from the service. But they're going to give you some time. They're not going to be like, oh, he tried and he sucked, kick him out. You know, they give you some opportunities to pass that.
Yeah, we both know that Paris Island is no joke when it comes to, if you're not adapting to the Marine Corps style, you're out. But you're also punished because you get to watch your class graduate.
Oh, man. You want to hear
those guys? You
want to hear a fucked up story, right? Okay, so this kid, when I left for boot camp, when I requested Paris Island, I came out of Lafayette, Indiana, and there was one other kid. There was me, one other dude, and a female that were going to Paris Island. We get down there. This kid is not. I mean, he's not in very good shape. It's just not going well for him. You know, we do our initial strength test, and so what happens when you show up to boot camp? You're there for like a week before you meet your actual drill instructors, and you have like Black Friday, or maybe a couple days. Then you have Black Fridays, what they call it, when you meet your actual drill instructors. But in that period beforehand, you do like the initial strength test, which is basically half a PFT. You do pull-ups, sit-ups, and then a mile and a half run. And you have to meet, like, I think you have to be able to do like 2 pull-ups or something like that. It's something super, super low. And this kid couldn't do it, and he was just struggling. We kept him with the platoon, and like 4 or 5 weeks, he kept fucking up. He was one of those guys, Private Piles, that's fucking up everything. And he got dropped from our platoon to go to the PCP, we call it pork chop platoon, or the physical conditioning platoon, where they send guys that are out of shape to get in better shape so they can continue on with boot camp. He got picked up with another platoon, and I think he got dropped one more time and picked up with another platoon. So we're coming to the end. We're about to graduate, and it's family day. And so the family day is the day before graduation. And when they do family day, you get to leave the squad bay, and your family's there, and you get to walk around with them for like 5 hours or however long it is. I don't remember how long. And the thing is, though, is in the squad bay is everyone's rifles. We always hang our rifles on the end of the racks. They're secured there. They're locked. And there's always a fire watch there to make sure that no one fucks with the rifles. They're not going to make one of the guys from our platoon stand fire watch because we're graduating. They brought this kid back that was in our platoon who was just now starting second phase of boot camp. So like his 4th or 5th week. He's been recycled this whole time. They brought him back to watch our weapons while we all went on family day. And it was like, dude, man, put that kid on suicide watch because he's watching all the dudes he should have been graduating with fucking leave, and he's still got at least half of his boot camp experience left to go. I'm like, man, that's tough.
I know to the outsider that they're like, oh my God, that's horrible. Oh my God. But people forget. 1, we're volunteers. 2, we're being trained for the most heinous act. Again, killing. And 3, it is a culture. It is a climate that we operate in. And we willingly involve ourselves in this. And not everybody makes it.
It's not for everybody.
Yeah. And there's another thing that I think culturally we've lost. You should feel shamed. Shame is not a bad thing. Shame can either shape you into becoming a better person, or you can allow shame to encompass your whole life. Let that shadow constantly hang over you, and you'll never be where you want to be. So you're at that crossroads. It's like a flip of the coin. Remember, I told you earlier, I was called a marginal soldier.
Yeah, that had to feel like shit. I mean, you said it didn't. I
felt shame.
Yeah, I would have been like, man, damn, that would have ruined the entire experience, you know, especially for someone like you who was like me, who that's all I wanted to do was join the military. Like, go to college, do these other things. What are you talking about? I'm going to the military. Like, you know, and then get told that, man.
Yeah, so here I was now in the Marine Corps, and I made that decision. Okay, I'm ashamed that he called me marginal. I can still close my eyes, see where I was standing in front of him, and still see that man pointing a finger at me. However, I made the decision. I am not going to let that drive me. I am not going to let that dictate me. And I ended up leaving the Marine Corps assigned to stay, a prestigious position that even then I was so ignorant, I did not know the ramifications of being involved with such a cadre of outstanding, hand-selected Marines.
Well,
I was still happy being a Marine.
yeah, yeah. I think everybody's like that.
Yeah.
Like I think when you come out of boot camp, you're just so immersed. You've been immersed in it so much that you can't help but be like a motivated dude. I had a buddy who went through the MESEP program, which is where you can go from enlisted to officer.
Yes.
They pay for you to go to college to finish your degree, and while you're in school, you attend OCS, the Officer Candidate School, and then once you finish college, you go to TBS, the basic school, and then you actually get your lieutenant bars and stuff like that. And I remember my buddy who was like, "Man, I'm just gonna go," and he's a recon guy. He's like, "I think I'm just gonna try to become like a logistics officer or something like that. I'm just trying to enjoy the second half of my career or whatever, and not be beat down with training and field ops and deployments and whatever." And I was like, all right, cool, man. And then he gets done with OCS and he's like, I want to become an infantry officer. I'm ready. I'm like, dude, you're still brainwashed right now. I was like, you're super motivated. Your motivation has been brought back.
The Marine Corps should be studied for its propaganda.
Yeah,
because
they beat it into you.
Yeah, like, who cares if you're a recon Marine? Who cares you're MARSOC? Who cares? Remember, when I was going through the Marine Corps, we didn't have names on our uniform.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have anything that, you just had that Eagle, Globe, and Anchor that you ironed on your uniform and it would peel away over time.
Yeah.
And I remember ironing that thing on, and to me, it was like, it was my badge of honor. I earned. If you think about the phases psychologically, what's happening to you? Your first phase, you look like a bag of trash in your uniform. Your cover's crushed. Your uniform's not rolled properly. Your boots are not bloused properly. You're buttoning it up to the top button. It's just ridiculous.
Nobody can
march.
And
all of a sudden, here come those third phase Marines, and their sleeves are rolled, and they got that Paris Island tan going. And they're lean, and there's something in the way they step. I always told everybody, if you ever want to see real marching, go to Paris Island, and probably see it here in Camp Pendleton. Watch that third phase. Watch when they do that right oblique. It's so crisp. You can almost hear the air snap. And again, there's so much pride that I came out of the Marine Corps. Now, today, I'm currently in a brigade operation sergeant major. And you walk into my office, and there's Marine Corps things hanging on my wall. More Marine Corps than there is Army. And I had at one point someone tell me, you're not even, you've spent more time in the Army than you have with the Marine Corps. I said, all you're looking at is a Marine in a soldier's uniform. Because my baseline is what I learned walking away from the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to battle as a Marine. I was selected as an E3 to lead a fire team into the breach in Kuwait. We assaulted a trench line full of enemy. We were throwing hand grenades, AT-4s. My first kills were in the Marine Corps. I was doing what I was supposed to be doing after 4 years. It doesn't get better than that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it didn't. I just viewed it, this was my job. And we're probably going off on the rails a little bit in terms of chronological order, but this helps people, if they're listening to this story of mine, what made me tick? What made me tick? And I have to say, the Marine Corps, that entity has always stayed with me. And I've told, up to a few years ago, I think even before the war, I was like, when I die, I don't want the American flag draped over my coffin. I want the Marine Corps flag draped over my coffin. And I was so proud when I made NCO. I was like, I don't care what I'm wearing, but I want to be buried with my Marine Corps NCO sword. I want to hold it in my hands. And this is before I even understood about, everybody has popularized and equated the Marine Corps heaven to Valhalla. And so I studied it a little bit. I'm like, well, first of all, in the times of knighthood, before you died, you had to be holding your sword. That was your ticket into Valhalla. You had to be near your sword. And so you cannot die without a sword. So you would see people rushing on the battle knowing, like, here's your sword, or you die in battle. So you had to be with your sword if you were dying as a natural cause, old age, whatever it may be. But if you were in battle, then that was the fallback to.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about it. I'm so proud of the Marine Corps has adopted a Spartan-like manner. They talk about it. They equate themselves to it. And you think about it, we lived like that. Now, you don't need that. You don't need that. Suffering is okay. You need to suffer. It helps you grow. Because when the real thing happens, you're like, that wasn't that bad. I suffered more in training. Like, there were times where I almost came to tears because the pain was it was too much for my body. I was tired. I was surrounded by people I didn't know. And I managed to move with my peers, get where they needed to be, but it was a painful process. That by the time combat came, I was getting more rest in combat. Yeah, we had long days and nights, but I knew the rest was coming. And so again, as my story develops, this is my baseline.
Yeah.
And, I hate to sound like the old man on the mountain, but I am. I'm old.
I'm the old guy. Yeah, you have to learn to suffer for sure, because you don't want to. Part of it is the whole pride and instilling that pride and legacy and stuff of the military and the Marine Corps. It makes you not want to let your dudes down. You're
Exactly.
like, I'm not going to be the one that falls out here. Like, so and so may
Right.
fall out, but I'm not going to fall out. Or, I'm not going to be the one that this, fucks this thing up. In your own mind, you're like, I'm not going to be the guy that fucks this up. And I think everybody's trying to be that. They have that in their mind, and it makes it where you just push just a little bit farther than people probably thought you could, because everyone's got this mentality like, I don't want to be the dude that fucking, slows us down or fucks
Right.
up the mission or something like that. Yeah,
So,
man.
to illustrate that point, exactly what you're saying. Now, you're brothers. I remember one time my squad, because I was paying child support payments. I was 20 some years old. I didn't have money to go home. My squad got money together and bought me a plane ticket to go see my parents.
Oh, that's cool.
Right? That's love. That's love and respect that you've earned. It's not given. You've earned that. So 6 months later, we're in Okinawa. We're on a 10-mile ruck march. Actually, it was an unknown distance. We just knew we were rucking, and it was a surprise on us. That the night before, rather than hydrating myself, I was drinking on a beach, getting sunburned, trying to pick up some Japanese chick, right? I failed. I got drunk, but I failed in that attempt. Anyway, we get back there, and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. Hey, man, pack your trash. We're going to do a ruck march. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? No one said anything. I'm like, hey, shut up, Marine. And they didn't call you Marine.
Yeah.
Right? So I shut up, devil dog. Just grab your trash. Everything's trash. Grab your trash. Get ready. So I was like, okay. And I'm rucking. And I'm hurting. And I'm dehydrated. And I'm carrying a saw. And my best friend, Madola, turns around and is like, hey, bro, take my M16 and you can carry that. I'll carry the saw for you. And even with that, I was still putting in greater distance between me and him. And he turns around and he goes, if you don't stay within arm's length, we're going to have an issue. And then this is my brother talking to me. Like, all right, man, I'm just hurting, man. I'm hungover. He's like, I don't care. Stay with the squad. I'm like, all right. Again, I got just beyond the arm's length that you're supposed to keep, that pace. And he turned around and he took a step towards me and he punched me as hard as he could, right square in the chest, and I fell on my back. And he goes, if you're going to fall out, you can do it with your own weapon. And he threw the saw on top of me. and I think people would hear that and like, oh my God, that's your friend. Why didn't he help you? Because this is the Marine Corps.
He is helping you. That's that tough love.
He is helping me. Exactly. When I'm hurting, I got to try harder. No one's going to feel sorry for you. If you're feeling sorry for you, you're wasting time and energy. That's what makes us win. That's what makes us go, you know what? We're going into Fallujah again. You know what? We're going into the breach. You know what? We're going to take that beach. We're going to go into that jungle. The only way you're going to beat me on that death ground is you kill me. But you better fear what stands behind me, because they got a battalion of brothers. The Japanese used to they used to brag about Tarawa when the 2nd Marine Division landed on that beach. They said it will take 1,000,000 years or 1,000 years. It'll take 1,000 years and 1,000,000 Marines to take the island. And we show up 72 hours later, we took it. We took it at a great, great cost. And maybe the tactics weren't the best. But what really got us through that? Our grit, our culture, the climate we were raised in. And that's what was going to get through. Everybody says, oh, Marines, even soldiers. Today's soldiers are nonsense. A good NCO, a good, strong officer, doesn't matter where you're old breed, new breed, you're still part of that brotherhood. And that's what's going to get you through. Somewhere along the line, you're going to meet that NCO. He's going to lead you through that mess. And you're going to walk away a victor. You don't survive trash. You walk away the victor because you slayed that enemy. And you should feel proud. That's how I think.
You're making me want to go re-enlist, man. I'm about to go drop my package. I'm going back.
Coming back. So
I want some more. So after you finished, we kind of skipped around a little bit, but after you finished boot camp and then you went to SOI, what was the first unit you went to?
Well, it was the only unit I went to
my
whole time. It was 1st Battalion, 6th Marine Regiment, 2nd Marine Division. And I started with the Alpha Company. And when I got there, the first thing I noticed, besides being hazed and harassed and I felt very intimidated. I shouldn't say everyone else, I just felt so. I was very intimidated. I watched these guys in SOI ruck by me, and you could hear them in the dark. I remember we were sitting in the ambush and like, hey man, there's a unit coming up around. I go, this isn't the guys we're supposed to ambush, because we were in School of Infantry, SOI. They're like, who is that? And they're like, that's the Fleet Marines. I'm like, holy cow. And you could hear them. Keep it tight. Keep it tight. You can hear the ammo boxes clanking off the external frame from the rucksack. You could hear it. These guys were moving fast at a pace I'd never seen before. And he goes, that's our home, brother. That's going to be our home unit. I'm like, wow. And then I thought, man, that's scary. Those guys sound mean as fuck out there.
Yeah.
And so when I got there, that's the impression I walked in with. And they did not let me down. They made me feel like you're here and it's a privilege to be here. I remember stepping off. So you go to reception at Camp Lejeune, and from there you get your assignment, and then they come and pick you up. And all the 6 Marines that were selected, we were brought into this. It looked like this dump, like a garage. And in walks this tall, gaunt, leather face. Like his face was tanned, but he had the deep lines, and he had 2 lines that went right down on each side of his face. And it turns out it is the Sergeant Major. Only time I ever had a one-sided conversation with a Sergeant Major, because I never talked to him after that. He comes in, and he gives us a brief history of the 6 Marines, Belleau Woods, World War II, the campaigns they participated in, Vietnam, and I believe he spoke about Lebanon. And in the way he talked, he had this kind of like speech impediment. Very, very subtle, but I noticed it. And then I found out later in Vietnam, he had been shot in the face by a 7.62 round, and it went through one cheek and out the other.
Oh, fuck, man.
This was my Sergeant Major.
Yeah.
Handing out the cord. So now we were getting blessed with another ornament on this heavy chest of responsibility and obligation and duty, and most of all, honor.
Do you want to explain what you're talking about? The when you guys show up and they give you guys the
Yeah, that's when you get your
French
cord.
Forget.
Yeah, the French Fourier, the Croix de Guerre, that was earned by the 6th Marines in World War One following the Battle of Belleau Woods. And you just don't want, again,
And
another
because
thing.
of that legacy, that unit is they're the only one that still wears it,
No,
right?
5th
Six Marines,
Marines
Fifth
also wear
Marines,
it.
and Sixth Marines. Okay,
Yeah, we're the only two organizations that wear it.
yeah,
And so, again, like I said earlier, you're constantly reminded of who you represent. And I remember, I know this probably, I don't know. I don't know what the listeners were expecting. I'm sure you're going to hear my story, but again, this is who I am. This is what built me.
yeah. We're working through it.
Yeah. So I get in there, and the most hazing that I got was they called me Chicken Head. I had this team leader, and his name was Hickey, and he was from Long Island, and he was an Irish boy, and he was tall and very lean, and he could ruck like nobody's business. Like, rucking to him was just normal walking. Rucking to me was, for every one step, I was taking 2 steps, and he cut no husk. And he was like, "Come here, chicken head." I'm like, "Oh man, what's he want?" Because he was my senior.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "What do you got in that ruck?" "No, man, you need to pack it like this." And he would dump in, like, pack it again. And these are all things that start helping you develop that leadership. And I'll go into it later. So that was my experience. Unfortunately, in my eyes, so Hickey and I would go fight in Kuwait. And just before we're going into the breach, where we had learned that, hey, they're expecting a 50% casualty rate going through the breach. 1-6 is leading the division into Kuwait. And it was Bravo Company that actually became the tip of the spear for 1-6, followed by Alpha Company, and then later Charlie. And Hickey was my team leader, so I was expecting him to lead me. And then it turned out, he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to go with mortars, and I'm going to be in the back. My bunions are bothering me, and I'm not going to be with you guys." And I already had an idea, like, I don't give a shit if they had cut off my big toe. I'm going with my squad.
Mm-hmm. His
I'm
bunions
going
were
to be.
bothering him.
I'm sorry?
You said his bunions were bothering him.
Yeah.
What the hell is a bunion? And that it's
So
something with your
bunions
foot.
are
I know that,
big,
but
when the big toe starts to turn in towards the foretoes, and the joint starts to go beyond the natural plane.
okay.
And so, and it's a genetic trait. I learned this later on in life. It's a genetic trait that happens. It is painful, but at the time I was like, "What do you mean you're not going to be with us? We're going into the breach. You're gonna go into a supportive role, even though Mortars is with us. They're behind us." And that's what happened. And there were 2 more incidents.
Were you bummed about that? I mean, were you like, man, this guy's letting us down?
It was a major, major letdown that when we got back, we got into a fist fight.
Really?
Yeah. By that time, I'd have been through jungle training. I'd been in Panama. I did 2 combat tours in Honduras. I was part of the follow-on for Operation Just Cause. I've been 2 months in mountain warfare school. Started out conventional, and I became an assault climber, and I did the snipers course. There was very little shooting. It involved more land navigation in the mountains and high-angle shooting.
High-angle shooting,
reconnaissance. Yeah. And so when I came back from Kuwait, I was golden child. I had led as an E3 a fire team while in the breach during the first day. The first day was chaotic.
Yeah.
Everything after that kind of just felt. We ran over Iraqi soldiers. They jumped into a trench, and they jumped into a trench line, and the AAV crossed over. And I remember the 50 gunner. He's like, "We got Iraqis beneath." I'm like, "Kill them!" We're all yelling, "Kill them!" Because less for us to fight. And that thing swiveled back and forth, left and right, burying them alive. And then it kept going.
Yeah.
We set off a daisy chain of mines that released nerve agent and mustard gas. And we went immediately to Mach 4 inside the AAV. And I remember sitting next to this Marine, Kiko was his name. It's not his real name, but that's what we called him. His eyes were real big, real big. He'd only been with us a few months. I was like, Kiko, it's going to be a dirty war, but we're good. We're trained. Just stay with me. And that 2,000-pound metal door suddenly, because it's black inside the AAV, the only light that's coming in from the gunner or the vehicle commander or the red light that's indicating transmissions. And all of a sudden, you see that first white line go across the top of the AAV, and that thing slams to the ground, and you know you're in it. And it was raining. It was raining oil on us. The sky was black. It smelled like oil. You're hearing the Harriers go over us, the helos coming in low. And so you know that the AAV is facing the enemy, and the squads, as they rip out of there in a run, they're going to the left and right. And I remember coming around the right side of the AAV, running towards the front, which is my 12 o'clock, my direction of travel where the enemy is. And I look to my right, and as I start to get in front of the AAV, I could see to my left, and it was just a line, like a beeline, like an ant line of AVs on line with thousands of Marines to my left and right, attacking fixed positions. It was a moment, and I'll never forget that. And I see those commercials, I'm like, man, it's not so dramatic, but it's very close. When you see the full might of the Marine Corps come on top of its enemy. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to let my brothers down. I'm going to kill as many as I can. I have no regret. I felt no remorse. I was going to make them suffer. And we did it. We did it. My sons make fun of me. They're like, Dad, stop. It's a firefight. That's all it was for you. I'm like, all right, man.
Everybody talks. It's funny because the GWAT guys are all like, oh, the Gulf War dudes, they only fought for a week, Like, oh, yeah. What are they talking about?
Man. It was a 96.
Crazy. What's really fucked up is like a couple days of fighting, but you were there for months to get ready for it, right?
10 months.
To be ready. Yeah.
10 months field operations. There was no barracks. There was nothing. Stayed on the ground in the beginning. Then they gave us, we slept on the ground. We slept in a hole. 1-6 got hit by French Mirages accidentally. So I experienced friendly fire. And I remember sitting in my fighting hole, and I saw something like a flash, back then in the old days, they had cameras, and they would put flash cubes stack them on top of a camera so you can take your picture, and that would give you your light. And it's my turn to watch. Every other man would be up. And I saw like a flash way in the distance. I'm like, are the Iraqis sending out recon patrols? I'm like, oh man, why would they take a picture with a flash? That doesn't make it. And as I'm saying this, I heard, and somebody started yelling incoming. And what they had done was they had dropped a cluster bomb. And so the cluster was coming down, which are mini bombs. And they're just, you probably know that better than I do. And then they just started exploding everywhere around us.
Yeah.
And I remember throwing myself back in my hole, and our holes weren't just a 2-man hole. It was more L-shaped. So my 12 o'clock, my hole, then it wasn't parallel with the enemy in front. It was vertical. And then and then behind that vertical, it had an L. So it looked like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to reach that, and I didn't make it. And so we got hit with these bombs, and we lost a guy. One of the guys got killed. Our colonel was almost killed.
Damn.
He got thrown on top of his E-tool. Some of us got half buried. And when I got up, And the next day was just business as usual. Life moves on. We'll mourn our dead later.
Yeah, what are you
And
gonna do?
this,
You can't stop,
yeah, you can't stop.
man.
And the,
That's getting friendly fire, man. That's especially with a fucking CBU, the cluster bomb unit coming in. For those that don't know, it's a bomb that drops and then like I don't know, 100 feet off the ground or whatever, it pops open and then it drops like 100 other little bomblets, basically like 100 little grenades that spread
right.
out. And there's different kinds. There's like anti-personnel ones and there's ones that are for like little shape charges that could take out armor and stuff as well. So that would be scary as shit, man. That would be
Yeah.
no good.
And that was so what psychologically what that told me how short life was. All
Yeah.
these all these things are happening to me and it would impact me on a very personal level with relationships, how I view the world, how I thought about people. And again, it's leading to what would be the ultimate experience in my life, which was Ramadi, Iraq.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So
well,
on,
before
on
we get
that
into
answer,
that, what were you guys doing? Because you did say you were in Honduras and Panama. What was going on down there?
that's a good question. And it's going to sound something like straight out of Tom Clancy, but it's real. Um, Justin, can we take a quick minute?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've been drinking coffee.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
All right, just give me a minute.
Yep.
So the question was, what were we doing in Honduras?
Yeah,
And
Honduras. You said you were in Honduras in '88 and Panama in '89. What was going on down there?
okay, so like everything, there's a story, and history played a big part of it. Nicaragua, during that period, had gone through a regime change. There was a dictator that we had supported called Somoza. And Somoza was a bona fide dictator, very corrupt. They had a 2% literacy rate in the country. And over 90% of probably the country was owned by 6% of the population. Very lopsided economy. And therefore, there was a rise in a particular movement by a group of individuals that were labeled Sandinistas. And these Sandinistas, I'm sure that their intent was noble. It was a social injustice. They recognized it. However, they made the mistake of aligning themselves with the Cubans, a communist country, which was a threat to our nation's security. And so at the same time, we already had forces operating in El Salvador, and Honduras had become another bastion for us in the military. So that was the background. And I was in the 6th Marine Regiment. I was fairly new in Alpha Company. And I was walking out of the barracks. I looked to my left and I saw this piece of paper. Nothing unique about it, but I'm a reader. So I'll stop and I'll read something. And sure enough, there's this piece of paper and they're looking for Spanish-speaking Marines. And it gives you a location to where you can apply and what time those doors are open. So I made a mental note of that and I didn't tell anyone. And this is what later, I guess, is what they referred to as an independent thinker. I said, I'm going to go see what this is all about. I speak Spanish. I'm Colombian. Spanish was my first language. I know how to read it and write it. So at the high school level. And so let me see what this is all about. So I go down into Kwanzaa Hut, right down at Camp Geiger, right down the road, somewhere in very close proximity to MCT and SOI. Because at that point, 1-6 was still at Camp Geiger, Brick City.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know even though they were stationed at 1-6 or
Yes.
1-6 was stationed at Geiger like that. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's where
Yes.
when I first came in, I was a mechanic, and that's where our MOS school was, and that's also where the
New River.
Montfort Point Marines. That's where they
Yes.
went to boot camp when we had segregated boot camp.
Okay. So there we are. We're the only regiment on Geiger. We're living in Brick City, right across from this huge chow hall. But right down the road were the Kwanzaa huts, and I just walked down there by myself. with no guidance, have no discussion with anyone. I walk into this room, and there's this gentleman. He's sitting on the corner of the desk. He looks a little overweight. He's wearing this huge mustache. No Marine thing about him, indicating he was a Marine. Turns out he was. I don't know in that capacity he was a Marine, but at some point I came to realize he was a Marine. And he says, "What do you want?" I said, "Well, I read this notification on the board, and it indicated that you're looking for Marines that can speak Spanish, and I can read, write, and speak Spanish." He goes, "You're Latino?" And I'm like, "Yes." He goes, "What's your ethnicity?" I said, "I'm Colombian. My parents are Colombian. Both are from Colombia. I'm the first American in my family, and my first language was Spanish." And I guess he was expecting more what people perceive to be Latino, like, the dark Mediterranean look.
Yeah.
And he's probably looking at my nose like, you're just, this big nose guy coming in claiming you're Latino. You're probably adopted. And he hands me a newspaper and says, "Go ahead and read this." And I realize it's in Spanish, so I start reading in Spanish silently. He goes, "Hey, numbnuts, out loud, out loud." I'm like, okay. So I started reading out loud, and I could see him shaking his head with approval. And he says, "Now go ahead and translate for me line by line what you just read." So in English. And I'm like, okay. So I start translating from Spanish to English. He grabs the newspaper out of my hand. He goes, "Who are you?" So I explain myself. He's like, "Put your name on that piece of paper." And I said, "Am I in?" He goes, "We'll be notifying you and your command." And I'm like, oh my God, I'm in trouble.
Oh yeah, you don't want to surprise the command with anything.
Right.
They will not be happy, especially if it's something that takes you away from doing the stuff you're supposed to be doing for them.
Exactly. I'm like, I'm in trouble. I'm like, "What do you mean you got to notify my command?" He goes, "You have to notify your command." I go, "Am I in trouble?" He goes, "Get the hell out of my Kwanzaa hut. You understand, Marine?" I'm like, oh man, I'm in trouble. So I go back, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but I got selected. And there was 21 of us from those 6 Marines that spoke Spanish. But in addition to that, we had some Spanish impaired Marines who just simply spoke English. And they called us Detachment 21 Alpha because we were being detached. There was 21 of us, and most of us came from Alpha Company. So hence Detachment 21 Alpha. No lie. Our leader was an NCO. He was a staff sergeant. Kind of had like a Christopher Walken kind of trait about him. Everything was real casual. Everything was laid back. And he was not a grunt. He was more, I believe he was an intel at E6. And there was an E5, and he was cocky. And the platoon commander was my own platoon commander. Red hair, freckles, blue eyes. But he had great people skills, very knowledgeable, very confident, and he would lead my first tour in Honduras. So the purpose of us to go in Honduras, well, let me back up a little bit. They start to tell us, again, the responsibility of what it means to be a Marine in Central America. So he's like, "Gentlemen," and I'm probably making it sound nice. I don't think they called us gentlemen. I think there was something very much more colorful than that. But basically, they told us we will be the first Marines since the Banana Wars in Central America shaping American policy. Now, probably to the 18-year-old, he's probably going, "I don't even know what that means." But to me, because I read a lot of books, I'm like, holy cow, the Banana Wars. Like, I'm talking like Smedley Butler, Patton. As you are, not Patton. Oh my God, forgive me. Chesty Puller. All these guys that were down there in Central America, in the Dominican. I'm going to be in there in the jungle just like them, shaping American policy. Like, cool, man. So everything had a success. Because of my love of reading, I always aligned it with history.
Mm-hmm.
And again, remember I said earlier, I had, as a kid, had read these series of novels about a family. And so in my mind, as I'm going through these experiences, I'm thinking about my family, my future family that I don't have at that point, except my son. And so we go. We go on a plane and we fly into Honduras and we go to a base called Surucano. And we start conducting combat patrols, live ammo in these jungles with our host nation partner, Hondurans. And in the beginning, we were just running patrols, watching. I don't know what they expected us to. I don't want to say I don't know. I don't remember who the enemy was, but we were running live combat patrols with these Hondurans.
Were you guys there as advisors, or were you there as just like to help plus up the capabilities?
In the beginning, it was just running joint patrols, and then it morphed into training the Hondurans in infantry tactics.
Okay.
And here I am as an E3. At one point, I was wearing a Honduran uniform with a red beret. And on my second tour, the Honduran Army, a sergeant major came up to me. Honduran sergeant major came up to me and says, Martinez, would you consider leaving the Marine Corps and coming over to the Honduran Army as an officer? Several of us were approached and asked. Of course, I said no. I was a Marine. Why the hell would I want to degrade myself to becoming a Honduran officer?
No offense to the Hondurans out there. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's how I thought. So as in the beginning, I didn't really understand our mission, but it became evident that we were there to run reconnaissance and determine if the Nicaraguan Sandinistas were crossing the border into Honduras to expand their sphere of influence. That was our mission. And so we were a deterrent. And it was during that period that we were seeing Russian Hinds. And then we started to mine the harbor. All this trash was going on in 88 all the way to 89.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so one day I made the mistake of running my mouth, and I had said something to the effect, I really don't blame the Sandinistas for what they've done. Their only problem was they aligned themselves with the Cubans. If we had been more open, because this is before coin, we really understood coin as we understand it today, we probably could have avoided that problem. That's my personal
counterinsurgency for those that don't know what coin is.
Oh, I'm sorry, counterinsurgency.
Yeah.
So counterinsurgency means that an insurgency is a group of individuals run by probably military leaders who are selecting individuals from a civilian population to overturn a current government or occupying force through the means of violence. A counterinsurgency comes in, which is us, and we counter any of their efforts. We try to stabilize. We do what's called full spectrum ops, offensive, defensive operations. In addition, we do stability operations. We provide them security. We try to create an infrastructure. And that is demonstrated through building schools, providing medical aid, a police force, something that gives them that first step in security, meeting their basic needs. Mm-hmm. If we had applied that, I think we could have turned that around. But again, I was only an E3. I had a limited knowledge, and I was living the life of a Marine. I was happy. I didn't really care who was on the opposite end of my barrel. But if they told me I had to kill that individual, that was not an issue for me. That's the truth. So the second tour, it got a little bit more different. And we started seeing more activity. And the mission started getting even more serious. And this time, it went from a detachment to part of 1/6 actually going down there, lead a lot of the reconnaissance patrols. And I didn't realize it, but I was being not groomed intentionally, but I was being shaped into a recon Marine that would lead me into a sniper slot. And I was being watched. I didn't realize that either. I was being watched by these snipers and reconnaissance Marines as a potential candidate. I was already good swimmer. I'd gone from the lowest level swimming all the way up to level 1. So back then, I guess in your era, they called what your swimmers? Combat swimmers?
It was like CWS 1, 2, and 3, and then they
Okay, so
changed it.
okay, so that's what we had. Three being the lowest and 1 being the highest. So I gone from a
and then CW and then the McQuiss was the highest.
okay.
Like if you were an instructor of combat water survival or whatever it was called.
Right. And so we called that water safety survival instructor, WSSI.
Okay.
And that I wanted that title because I worked so hard on my swimming. And anyway, so I'm running recon patrols with Honduran commandos, and we went in there with limited food. We were supposed to be in this jungle for X amount of time. Our operations got extended. We ran out of food. We were boiling water. The commando showed us how to separate rice from grain and drink water from leaves. And I had to eat these hard beans for the protein. At one point, I was so hungry, we started to come down the mountain because we were supposed to be extracted by helicopter, and it didn't work out. So they said, hey, you're going to meet a ground element, a friendly ground element. Go to this rendezvous point. And as we start making our way down there, we're thinking we're going to get killed. They know that we're probably being watched. And they tell us on the radio that the element that's coming to pick us up is a Marine dressed as a Honduran, meaning civilian clothes, probably Latino, picking us up in a school bus on a road, on the side of a road.
Yeah, right outside the jungle.
So
That's
we break
crazy
through the
time.
jungle. Yeah, so we break through the jungle, and we're heavily camoed, we're armed to the teeth, and just before I go into the opening of the open area, there's a woman sitting out there with huge breasts, and she's breastfeeding her baby. Marines are Marines. We look at each other, and it's like, Martinez, don't you even think about it. I'm like, it's not the woman I want. I just want some of that milk, man.
Oh my gosh.
That's how I thought. I was a total savage. I just thought about me and my team. And that milk, it looked good. But we didn't do anything. We came through the jungle. We stepped out into her yard. She was horrified. She was not sure what she was looking at.
Oh, I'm sure.
And she was not sure if she was looking at enemy, military, friendly, or she did not comprehend it. And she got up, ran inside, and we never saw her again. We stayed by the side of the house, and we linked up with a school bus. And on the school bus, they had a medical team. And by this time, I had been so dehydrated that I had a fever blister, and the jungle had caused the fever blister to expand down into my chin.
Oh, shit.
So I got this huge open sore from my lip down to my chin. And there's a doc on there. He's checking us out because we had been beyond we had went to the level of extreme hunger. And he's looking at me. He's like, what is that? What's wrong with your face? And I'm like, hey, I have fever blisters from time to time. I guess I was dehydrated and it got infected in the jungle. He goes, okay, I got a topical for that. It's a white cream. Bro, I have no qualms about telling you if I got picked on or anything. I laugh. I got a hard exterior. And of course, the Marines, I'm putting this thing on and it's healing. And, it's white. It's hanging from your mouth. And, you hear from them, Martinez, what are you doing? Are you trying to win some points with it? What's going on over there? Is that really topical cream or is that something else? It's that typical Marine.
Just talking shit.
Depraved humor.
Yeah.
And so that was my second tour. I made no enemy contact. There were a couple hair-raising moments. So at one point in the jungle, we had set up in a patrol base, and we had gone days without showering. And I get it in my head. This is what I later learned about my independent thinking. I'm like, I'm going to take a bath. I don't know where, but I'm going to go find it. And so some Marines said, hey, there's a natural pool of water. You can literally slip in, and the water is being fed by a waterfall, and you can bathe in there. So rather than do the right thing and go with a battle buddy, I went by myself. and I came out on top of the waterfall, but there was also another natural body of water that looked like a pool. And brother, I was naked. I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. It's cold, it's fresh. I came out, I put on my uniform, and rather than coming down the way I originally entered to get on top of that waterfall, I decided to go up the opposite side thinking I'm going to be good to go. And what I didn't realize was that I was in an elevated area and I was walking on top of limbs when I stepped off onto that opposite side, and I crashed through the trees. And I landed on the bottom, and my whole side was raked up from the limbs. I was just torn. And I'm like, man, I'm fucked up. And I thought, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm by myself and I got hurt. And I can't move. So I think to myself, what can I do? I'm like, oh, I'll go down to the bottom of the waterfall, and this line of water will take me back near the patrol base. The problem is we had set up claymore mines across the water leading to the patrol base. And we had sentries posted to ensure that the Sandinistas didn't try to creep up on us, because that was the most basic avenue of approach for us. So obviously we're going to try to channelize them into a killing zone. And I decided to take that way because it's the only way I could go with my injuries. And I remember coming up to the first wire, and I thought to myself, I know how to disarm this. I just got to find the claymore, or maybe I can get up underneath it. And I decide I'm not going to go look for the claymore. I'm just going to get underneath the wire. And I literally like burrow on the rocks in the water to get underneath the wire, and I come up on the other side. Now I'm between claymores, and one of the sentries spot me, and he says, Martinez? I'm like, yeah. He goes, what the fuck are you doing? Like, dude, I'm hurt. Don't tell the platoon commander. I'm hurt, man. He goes, hold on a second. So he goes and disarms the claymore, and they come down the embankment, and they grab me out of the water. And again, these things are shaping me.
Yeah, man. That's crazy, dude. I've never done any jungle stuff. I didn't, never got an opportunity to go to Okinawa or do their jungle warfare training school there or anything like that. That's crazy. You step onto something, you don't even realize you're up in the air. You just go falling.
Yeah, I was elevated probably about 7-8 feet.
Yeah. That's it's a whole nother, I always thought about it, because as a forward observer, JTAC, during my time, I'm like, if we ever fought in a jungle, that would be so difficult to do my job, to try to get an aircraft onto target, or, I mean, in the manuals, the like 3 TAC 16.6, I believe, the forward observer manual, it talks about shooting artillery and making corrections based off sound. And people are like, why would you ever use that? And then it's like, dude, when you're in the jungle, I think you're not going to be able to see impacts. You're not really going to know where your enemy is, because, I mean, how far could you really see when you're looking through the jungle? Like 20 feet, maybe?
Maybe 7 meters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
depending on the jungle, depending on how thick the trees are, depending on what part of the jungle you're in.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have, the jungle has layers.
Yeah.
A first canopy, a second canopy, then a triple canopy. And in addition to that, the jungle is it's like literally, when you step off the hard road and you walk into the jungle, everything's decomposing at the lowest level. So when it's decomposing, there's that particular smell that the jungle carries. And it's like walking into the mouth of someone who hasn't brushed their teeth. Mm. It just smells horrible. And Okinawa was like that. Panama was like that. However, Honduras, there were certain areas that were very thick, and there were certain areas that looked like a very wooded area. Like I would say a rich forest is the best way I could describe it. Mm-hmm. But as I later learned, surviving in the jungle, a lot of times you weren't worried about the enemy. You were worried about the jungle. Yeah. I got slapped by a bat on a patrol. This bat flew in and slapped me like a woman. And I was like, what's that? And all you heard was, I'm like, dude, I just got beat up by a bat, man. I had rocks thrown at me by these howling monkeys. We're sitting in, at this point, we're a bunch of snipers are sitting in the harbor site, and we're waiting to get extracted, and I feel this rock hit my helmet. So I turn around like, hey man, knock it off, guys. Be cool. And they're like, what are you talking about? I can hear them whispering. And it's like, it's lower than a whisper. And again, a rock hits me. I'm like, I'm serious. Knock it off. I know this is training, but, be serious. Because I'm a team leader. I'm a patrol leader at this point. In snipers, they have patrol leaders and assistant patrol leaders. Rank is not an issue. It's based on your experience and your merit and the ability to lead and train. So I'm like, okay. Finally, I get hit a third time, and I stand. I'm like, all right, you fuckers, knock it off. I'm serious. And I hear the monkey laughing. I'm like, oh. So I pick up a rock and I fling it. And I threw it like, well, the best I could. I wasn't really much of an athlete growing up, and I'm lucky I can throw hand grenades. And so it happens, the monkey catches the rock and he throws it back harder than me. And I was like, God. We had what was called 50 caliber ants. We had this guy Staples. We called him Mighty Joe Young. He was, again, African American. He was stocky, like he looked like a fitness weightlifter. He was just a walking African American Adonis, just everything. So one day I wake up in the morning early, and I see Staples, and he's walking through the jungle, and he's moving from like side to side, and I'm like, Staples, what's wrong? And then he just drops, and foam is coming out of his mouth, and he had been bitten by these 50 cal ants. Another platoon had gotten struck by lightning. We had to go look for this platoon, and they grabbed the snipers and like, go find this platoon, man. The last call was, well, they were on the radio, and we believe they got hit by lightning. So we, as snipers, were trained in man tracking. And I was like, this is a good training opportunity. That's how I looked at it. Good training opportunity. Let's go. So they flew us in. We went to their last known location. It wasn't very difficult to find them. We find them, and they're all in these little pockets of Marines. And they're all saying, I'm injured. The platoon sergeant had gotten lifted into the air, came crashing down, straddling a fallen tree, and he had literally crushed one of his testicles. The radio operator, because they had been standing in running water or crouching in running water, when the lightning bolt hit, it melted the handset to the radio operator's hand, and the bolt traveled down his body and came out his leg. And I was like, where's the skipper? They're like, I don't know. Like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, I don't know, man. We've seen him. And I said, 6 Actual's been looking for him on the radio. That's why we're out here. So where is he? Is he injured? Did he die? What's the case? They're like, no, man. I'm like, all right. So I was like, I'll go look for him. I started doing so you walk in circles, and each time you're looking for indicators. And each time I'm like, well, if I'm confused and disoriented, where would I go? Well, it's the path of least resistance. So I found him, and he scared me because I didn't see him at first. I just knew I was heading in the right direction. And out in the middle of the open, it's like these long grass, and there's darker shades of grass there. And then part of that shade of grass, it moved. And I stopped and I crouched, and I wasn't sure what I was looking at. At this point, we're in Panama. I'm like, why is there somebody hiding out there? And what this officer had done was he had taken his whoopee, which was camouflage pattern, and he had draped himself over it. And so that's what had caught me. It was shinier than the rest of the grass. And when he pulled it back, well, he was a typical white guy, like white as possible, like the kind of guy that stands in the sun for 5 minutes and he's like third-degree sunburn on him. And he had these piercing blue eyes, and he had this blonde, flat top, and he was still wearing his glasses. And I realized it's the skipper. I'm like, sir, 6 Actual's looking for you on the radio. And he's just looking at me with this blank look. And he's completely naked. And I was like, sir, get your uniform on, grab your weapon. We got to go talk to the six actual. I was like, I'm not doing it. Like, sir, if you turn your back one more time to me, I'm an E3. You turn back. If you turn your back to me, I have my orders. You're coming back with us, and I will take you to the ground. And he looked at me. He's like, okay. Gets dressed. We get back, and they fly us out of there. He got relieved soon thereafter.
Was
But
he
my
just
point
all
is,
fucked up from like that, from
yeah.
getting hit? Yeah.
So he was an aviation officer and decided he wanted to become an infantry officer.
Mm.
And it was a different culture.
Oh, for sure.
We were rude. We were crude. I'll give you another example how crude it can be. So one day we're in Honduras and we just come off a patrol. We're sitting around and we're eating our MREs, which were nasty back then. Today they're like gourmet meals. And we're eating, and one guy puts up something and he wants to trade it. And he goes, Martinez, you got a sister? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I know you like these chocolate chip cookies. If you promise me your sister when we get back, you can have it. And there's this new lieutenant. He's watching us. And apparently he turned to our old lieutenant and he was like, did they really do things like that? He goes, it's the grunts. That's the way they are. It's
funny.
great.
It's a different world, especially if you're like any kind of combat arms and stuff like that. We were in Djibouti doing some training there, and we came ashore, or the ANGLICO team. I was this was on my last deployment, so I was part of the MUF staff. I was the fires chief, and the ANGLICO team we had went ashore, and I came in after them to just kind of go up to the observation post, the OP, and hang out with them for a little bit. Well, they had brought two Navy fires officers that were just blue side Navy that would run like fire control computers on ship to come out to the OP so you could like see what actually occurs on the ground side. And it's training. We're out here doing stuff. We got new guys. We got senior guys. And one of the new guys had fucked something up, and they were just laying into him. And these two Navy ensigns, they were both like O2s or O3s, were just like, what the fuck? Like watching this dude getting chewed out and like everything. They're just like, this is okay. You can just see them. They just stood off to the side and were like, we're not saying anything. We're just gonna sit here and not, this is not our show. So I don't know what that is, but damn, it was pretty funny to see. But
it just adds to our legacy and mystique. Honestly.
It's just different. It's different worlds, man. It's completely different worlds. And I've said it a shit ton of times on the podcast, but it's like, when you're dealing in real life and death, when things are really serious, especially I was fire support. So it's like, you can't mess that up. If I'm shooting artillery or dropping a bomb, you can't mess that up. Like there's no room for error there, because if the results can be disastrous for you or someone that just not, didn't do nothing wrong. Now their house is blown up, like it can be bad. So there's just not a lot. There's no room for error there.
And it's not just knowing your tactics; it's being knowledgeable in your field. It's being knowledgeable in maturity,
maintaining situational awareness of what's going on around you, how the environment, the different environmentals around you affect what you're doing. Be it weather, be it people, be it whatever. Being in the jungle, that's obviously
right.
Doing that is completely different than going out to OP Arta Arta Beach and stuff in Djibouti and doing call for fire there. It's just two different things. So
right. And in addition to that, on top of all that, your technical and tactical proficiency, you have to be, as you are, you have to be physically fit.
Yeah, that's just a natural
responsibility.
Part of it.
Yeah. And for me, as a Marine, staying fit meant not what did I need to pass. I just didn't want to be the Marine that just passed. I wanted to be the Marine trying to get that perfect score, which I never did. I was like a 285. And because I could never get that 18-minute 3-miler. I was
crazy.
Like 1924, 1936. It was just, it always eluded me. But anyway, that was part of it too. So, and you think it has to do with just wanting to be the best. But God forbid if one of my Marines went down and I couldn't get to him fast enough because I did not improve my level of fitness. I didn't seek to become the best I could.
Yeah.
And I want to ensure to the rest of your audience, this is my perception. This is my baseline. I'm not trying to recruit nobody. I'm not trying to tell you go to Marines. Every service has its good service people. It really does. And it's gotten so much that we're constantly being integrated. We're constantly doing joint service. And we're taking the best of the units, matching them with the other best units of other organizations. And if they're not as good as we are, we're going to make them meet our standard, or vice versa. It's just the way it is.
And there's just different missions and stuff. And it is a different mentality for people that join the Army over the Marines, over the Air Force. You know, everybody's in it for a different reason. And one thing I remember when we were in Kuwait on my 4th deployment, we worked with we had an Army Aviation Brigade there that we were doing a lot of close air support with their Apaches and stuff a couple times a week, you know. So we'd go over there and talk to them and stuff and plan training out at Camp Buring. And then we'd go out to OP-10 in the desert and, you know, shoot and everything. And one day, one of the Apache officers, we were there in their area of the compound. He's like, "Hey, what's your guys' minimum requirement for crunches?" And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm not even sure. And like another dude, I was like, do you know? And like none of us knew. There was like 3 of us, and none of us knew. And he looked at the other dude, and he's like, the other Army officer he's talking to, he's like, this is what I'm talking about. None of these fucking dudes know what the minimum score is. They just know what the top score is. They don't even worry about the minimum score. Because that's like, why would you even set that as your goal? He goes, we're all over here worrying about like, I got to get, you know, however many push-ups. The minimum is this, so meet the minimum. And he's like, that's just a different mentality. And I'm like, oh, I never really, because I was like, dude, what is the lowest? It's like 50, 60, something like that. I'm like, but who only does 50? You know, like that's crazy talk.
And again, that's just our culture.
It's just a different mentality, man. Yeah. But yeah, dude, this has been a super interesting conversation. We've gotten all the way up until, you know, your time in the Marine Corps. For the next episode, we're going to have to do another episode. Following this, you got out and went back into the Army National Guard, correct? And then you did multiple deployments there. And then you and your sons went and became part of the Western Volunteer Force for the Peshmerga. Fighting ISIS, which is, I really want to get into that. And I know the audience will really enjoy that, but we're going to have to save that for the next episode. I really appreciate you coming on, man. It's your time in is obviously different than mine, and it's always cool to hear these different kind of perspectives, like going down to the jungle in Honduras and stuff. I've known guys have gone to South America and done different kinds of missions and different kinds of things, but I've never sat down and had a discussion with someone on some of the stuff they did. So really insightful stuff. I really appreciate you coming on. You're not on any social media or anything, right?
No, not really. I am on Facebook. I share it with my wife. Rich and Angel. My name is Harry Martinez. My wife calls me Rich. There's a story behind that, like everything else it seems like in my life.
There's always a story, right?
But she's from the South, and my name goes from a noun to an adjective. It becomes Harry.
Yeah.
It's Harry.
Okay.
And so to make it easier for Southerners,
just keep it that
sorry
way.
If you're offended. Actually, I'm not sorry you're offended, but I was like, call me Richard, and it went to Rich. So whichever preference you want, I'm good with it. But on Facebook, we're Rich and Angel.
Okay. Did you have any kind of organizations or anything that you wanted to promote before we get off here?
I did. And, you know, it's the American Snipers Organization. Very quickly, the reason I'm a big fan of them is because I'm alive because of them. They supported us tremendously in the opening years of the Iraq War. We weren't getting the equipment we needed. We weren't getting the training we needed. And anything that I needed to get accomplished, they were my go-to, and they came through above and beyond. Brian Sane, a Houston SWAT sniper from Texas.
I'm friends with him on Facebook.
One of the leaders in that organization. Yeah. I'm sorry?
I said I'm actually friends with him on Facebook. Oh, weird.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Small world.
So, yeah, it's just... In the sniper community, in both law enforcement and military, it's a very small community. So, but right now, off the top of my head, you know, I will endorse them to the end. I'm alive because of them.
Yeah, you said that they were sending you actual gun parts, like like
Yes.
different stocks, different sights, and stuff like that for your guys' long rifles. That's
So
pretty wild.
we've received the Sage International stocks, which were almost identical to the Army's enhanced rifle stock. And we also received laser rangefinders, optics, holsters. They pulled out all the stops and did much better than what our organizations were doing to supply us. So much so that, and we'll get into this later, but basically at one point we were having mailed to us weapon parts from barrels to upper carriers, lower carriers, different optics. I actually had my police sniper rifle mailed to me to use in Ramadi, and that's a whole different conversation. And basically what I did real quickly was I fused my police sniper experience, my Marine Corps sniper experience, and everything that I've read about becoming an Army sniper. Because here's the thing that's probably going to shock a lot of people. My entire military sniper experience, I was selected and I went through the training while on the job. And everything that I learned being a military sniper was taught to me by great NCOs, great leaders. And I absorbed it like a sponge. And then when I became a police sniper, I did 10 weeks of school at different organizations, from the FBI to private companies. And I ended up becoming a military police instructor. I'm sorry, as you are, a police sniper instructor.
That's good stuff, man. And you can tell, obviously you can tell you really enjoy what you do, and you take pride in the things that you've done and the people you've met, and the experiences that you've had. And again, like I said, man, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. If anybody, I'll put that organization's information in my in the show description so people can check it out there. And then, as always, for people that want to check out my stuff, my Instagram is @formeractionguys and @jkramergraphics. Both of those, check those out. And my website is jkramergraphics.com. Hop on there, pick up a T-shirt or a sticker or something like that. Help support the show. Again, I really appreciate you coming on, man, and it's been a good time.
Justin, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to voice my story. Give it a voice, so to speak, give it some exposure. And, I look forward to our next conversation. And anything that you need from me, even after the show or after we do whatever it is you want to do, I'm available.
Sounds good.
24/7. Just reach out, brother.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi, dude.